My name is Natalie Carter. I am 34 years old, and I just returned home after serving 12 years in the United States Army. I had spent most of my adult life overseas in Iraq, Afghanistan, and later in Germany, working as a combat medic, patching up the wounded in field hospitals, and holding the hands of soldiers as they whispered their last goodbyes. I've seen the best and worst of humanity in the most unforgiving places, but nothing prepared me for the phone call I got 3 days before Christmas. I had just finished unpacking the last box in my new apartment in Seattle. It wasn't anything fancy, a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a view of a parking lot, but it was mine. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't living out of a duffel bag or a barracks trunk. The living room smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh laundry. My suitcase was already packed for the holidays. I'd bought gifts, wrapped them neatly, and even picked out a new sweater in deep red wool. Simple, soft, festive. I was reaching for my keys when my phone rang. It was my younger brother, Dylan. "Hey, Nat," he started casually, like nothing was wrong. "So listen about Christmas." My stomach tightened. He kept going. "Lena's coming, right? She's really big on energy, like how a room feels. And with you just getting back, and everything you've seen and been through, she's worried it might feel heavy." Heavy. The words sank like a stone in my gut. He added quickly, "It's not personal. It's just maybe it's better if you sit this one out." I didn't respond. I didn't ask if he was serious. I just listened to the silence that followed. An hour later, my mother called. Her voice was soft, almost syrupy. "Honey, we're just trying to make things smooth. You know how sensitive Lena is. If you come, it might confuse things. Honestly, we might not even answer the door." That was when it hit me. I wasn't just uninvited. I was erased. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I said, "Okay," and hung up. Then I walked over to my bag, unzipped it, and slowly began putting everything away. Not because I wasn't going anywhere, but because I finally understood where I stood. And this year, I wasn't going to fight for a seat at a table where I was no longer welcome. I used to believe that coming home would feel like healing, that after years of sandstorms, combat boots, and triage tents, I'd step back into a place where I belonged, a place where someone would say, "You've been through so much, we're proud of you." But that moment never came. Growing up, I was always the outlier in my family. My mother liked soft voices and dresses. She taught Dylan how to bake cookies and told me I ran like a boy. When I was 10, I asked for a telescope for Christmas. I got a pink jewelry box instead. They said I was too intense, too serious, too stubborn. When I joined the army at 22, my mom cried, not out of pride, but embarrassment. "You're going to be crawling in the dirt like a man," she said. "How are you ever going to find a husband out there?" My father didn't say anything. He just looked over the rim of his coffee mug and said, "Don't come back broken." Dylan, meanwhile, was the golden child. Sensitive, artistic, creative. Every time he painted something vaguely coherent, it went up on the fridge. When he dropped out of art school to explore himself creatively, they threw him a welcome home dinner with balloons. When I shipped out for my first deployment, they forgot to call. But I still sent gifts every year, still called on birthdays, still mailed postcards from faraway places with little drawings of sunsets and notes like, "Hope this one makes you smile." I paid off the last chunk of their roof repair after a storm 2 winters ago, quietly, anonymously. I didn't need credit. I just wanted them to be okay. I sent Dylan money when his freelance photography gigs didn't pay enough to cover rent. Once I even pawned an antique watch I gave him in Germany so he could replace his broken laptop. Not once did I ask for anything in return. I was the helper, the quiet supporter, the practical one who always showed up no matter how little space was left for me at the table, and I told myself that was enough. But over time, I started to see the pattern. They praised Dylan for being empathetic while telling me I was too intense. When he forgot a birthday, it was charming. When I did, it was careless. When he shared a painting about grief, it was deep. When I talked about comforting a dying soldier, it was too much. I had confused being useful with being valued. And now, after 12 years of being good, quiet, strong, after patching wounds in war zones and learning how to breathe through grief, I was being told that my presence was simply too heavy, that I didn't belong in the joy they wanted to stage. And for the first time, I stopped blaming myself for not fitting in, because maybe the table was unbuilt for someone like me to begin with. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not my old squadmates, not my neighbor across the hall who always offered to feed my cat if I traveled. Not even Claire, my closest friend from med school, who once mailed me a Christmas card addressed to my favorite chaos medic. I just stayed quiet. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with my unpacked gifts. I had picked them carefully, things with meaning. A new watercolor brush set for Dylan, a wool scarf for my mother in her favorite shade of navy, a signed hardcover of my dad's favorite Cold War thriller found at a tiny bookshop in Prague. I stared at them for a while. Then I took a deep breath, peeled the tags off, and tucked everything back into my closet. I opened my banking app and started making changes. The automatic $500 transfer I sent monthly to help with Dylan's rent cancelled it. The rainy day fund I quietly kept for my parents closed. The prepaid grocery card I had scheduled to arrive on the 24th voided. It wasn't an act of revenge. I didn't feel anger, just clarity. I had built my life around being useful to people who didn't value the person behind the support. And I was done. Christmas Eve came. Snow dusted the windowsills like powdered sugar. I made myself hot chocolate, lit the smallest candle I owned, and wrapped myself in a fleece blanket that still smelled faintly of military detergent. I didn't cry. I didn't play sad music or write dramatic journal entries. I just sat in the quiet, letting the stillness settle like snow. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I wasn't waiting for someone to text, to call, to say we were wrong, because something in me had shifted. This wasn't about winning them back. This was about walking away from the part of me that kept hoping they'd change. I spent Christmas Day walking through Green Lake Park, sipping coffee from a thermos, and watching families laugh on sleds and kids build lopsided snowmen. And even though I was alone, I felt more like myself than I had in years. I wasn't heavy. I was free. 2 days after Christmas, my phone rang. It was Aunt Beth, my dad's sister. She's the kind of woman who still writes birthday cards in cursive and includes a pressed flower between the pages. I hadn't heard from her in months, so when I saw her name flash across my screen, I hesitated before answering. Her voice was hushed, like she was calling from a closet. "Natalie, what happened?" she asked. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Christmas. Lena left in the middle of dinner. No one knows what happened. Your name came up." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean my name came up?" "I wasn't even there, I know," she said. "But apparently Lena saw a photo of you in the hallway. One of those old framed ones, maybe from your graduation." I remembered the picture. I was 23, in full uniform, standing between my parents. My mum wore pearls. My dad's hand rested awkwardly on my shoulder, like he was unsure how to touch top pride. Beth continued. "Lena stared at it for a long time. Then she asked your mother if that was you. When they said yes, she got really quiet. She asked something like, 'Is that the same Natalie who served in Fallujah?' My heart skipped Fallujah," she went on. "Turns out Lena's father was a contractor overseas. He was injured in an IED blast outside the green zone. She was only 19. She said a female medic saved him. Talked him through the pain, kept him awake, kept him alive. She never forgot her name. Natalie Carter." I sat there stunned. A memory came flooding back. An older man with shrapnel in his leg and glass in his neck. I had held his hand as we waited for the chopper. He'd asked me to tell his daughter that he was sorry for missing Christmas again. I told him I would. Lena hadn't known it was me until she saw that photo, and then I asked quietly. Beth paused. She asked if you were the same sister they talked about. When your mum said yes, well, Lena got up, grabbed her coat, and walked out. Didn't say another word. I imagined the room falling into that thick, icy silence that only happens when someone tells the truth without raising their voice. No shouting, no accusations, just truth and the discomfort it leaves behind. She posted something online, too, Beth added, didn't name names. But it's spreading something about cruelty behind smiles, and how sometimes the kindest people are the ones treated like shadows in their own families. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She hadn't meant to cause drama. She had simply seen me, and for once, that was enough to change everything. The first call came that evening. It was my mother. She didn't say hello. Her voice was tight, brittle, like a wire pulled too far. I don't know what you said to her, she began, but Dylan is a mess. Lena blocked him. She won't return his calls. She posted something that's going viral in those art communities she's in. I didn't say anything. She continued. She tagged your photo in one of the comments. Said you were the medic who saved her father. That's not something you just broadcast. There it was. Not concern, not curiosity, just damage control. She's dragging Dylan's name, my mum snapped, and she made it sound like we mistreated you. That's not fair. We never meant to hurt you. I stayed quiet. Wyatt. Eventually, she said what she had really called for. We need you to reach out to her, clarify things, let her know there were no bad intentions. Of course, I wasn't their daughter now. I was their PR team. They didn't want me to feel better. They wanted the situation to go away. I hung up without agreeing to anything. The next morning, I received an email. It was signed by all three of them, my mother, my father, and Dylan. A unified front, a committee of backpedaling. The subject line read, "Let's reset." The message was carefully worded, polite, vague, manipulative. They acknowledged that emotions ran high and some actions may have been misinterpreted. No apologies, just diplomatic rewrites of history. Then, buried in the fourth paragraph, came the real request. They would really appreciate it if I contacted Lena and helped clarify the narrative. That was the moment I closed the laptop and laughed quietly, bitterly. They weren't sorry I was hurt. They were sorry I mattered to someone who could expose them. Later that week, I got a call from my former commanding officer. He told me kindly but firmly that someone had called his office. Someone claiming to be concerned about my emotional stability post-discharge. My blood ran cold. He assured me he had dismissed it immediately. Said it didn't even warrant a report, but the fact that it had happened. My father, it had to be. He didn't call me directly, but he called my chain of command. He had tried to discredit me, undermine me, take away the one thing I had earned entirely on my own. And with that, something final clicked into place. This wasn't just about being excluded from Christmas. So, this was about being written out of the story entirely. And for the first time, I had no desire to write myself back in. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the knock came. I was folding laundry, halfway through a mug of black coffee, still in sweatpants. No plans, no expectations. When I peeked through the peephole, I froze. All three of them were there. My mother, my father, Dylan. They stood stiffly on the porch, hands clasped, faces carefully arranged into what they probably thought looked like concern. I opened the door, but didn't move from the threshold. My mother spoke first. "We just want to talk," she said gently. Too gently. Behind her, Dylan looked like a ghost of himself, disheveled, quiet, eyes darting everywhere but mine. My father stayed silent. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "We've been thinking about everything," my mum continued. "And we realized maybe we could have handled things better. There was no we were wrong, just maybe." Then she added, "But this thing with Lena, it's gotten out of hand." There it was. Not a visit for me, but for the problem my presence had created. I didn't respond. Dylan finally spoke. She said I let people mock someone she admired, that I laughed when they made jokes about you being intense, that I didn't stop it. He looked at me then, really looked. "Did I?" he asked, voice cracking. "Did I let that happen?" I wanted to scream yes. I wanted to list every eye roll, every dismissive joke, every time he called me buzzkill or too serious. But I didn't, because the answer was already written on his face. "You didn't just let it happen," I said softly. "You joined in." They stood there waiting, hoping maybe that I would fold like I always did, that I'd invite them in, that I'd say it was all okay. But I didn't. I let the silence grow thick between us, then said one word. "No." Not angry, not cruel, just firm, final. "No, I won't help clean this up. No, I won't lie to make you more comfortable. And no, I don't want to talk." My mum flinched. My dad looked away. Dylan opened his mouth, then closed it. I stepped back and shut the door. Not with a slam, just with the kind of quiet that echoes louder than any scream. And on the other side of that door, I exhaled. Not because it was over, but because I had finally chosen myself. 3 days later, a package arrived. No return address, just my name, handwritten in neat block letters, and a wax seal on the back of the envelope. Inside was a letter, thick cream paper, ink slightly smudged in places. It was from Lena. She wrote about her father, how he still talks about the medic who held his hand and told him he wasn't going to die alone, how that moment had shaped the way he lived the rest of his life, how to this day he keeps a photo of his medical team in his study and her mother still calls him lucky. Then she wrote about that night. How it felt walking into a home where people smiled with their teeth but spoke in shadows. How she sat at a table surrounded by laughter that didn't feel real. How she heard my name used like a punchline. "I thought I was walking into a celebration," she wrote. "Instead, I walked into a room full of people, trying to silence someone who once saved my family." She said she didn't leave to be dramatic. She left because pretending not to notice felt like betrayal. At the end of the letter, she thanked me, not for the medical care, but for standing firm in who I was, for reminding me, she wrote, that strength doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it just says no one means it. I read the letter 3 times. Then I framed it. I hung it right beside my discharge certificate and the flag from my last deployment. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. Not to people who mistook quiet for weakness. Not to a family who only saw value in what I could do for them. Not to myself. Because for the first time, someone had seen me not through a lens of obligation or expectation, but through truth. And that truth wasn't heavy. It was grounding. I sat at my desk that evening, finishing a few freelance pieces I'd taken on since coming home. The light from the window stretched long and golden across the floor. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear kids laughing in the snow. And I realized I didn't need a table that didn't have room for me. I had built my own, and at that table I sat in peace.